The first story is about 1992. It's quite detailed. It's as follows. A private press. Now, the story begins by describing the state of the media in Ghana at the time. It says a private press industry had begun in Ghana since the removal of the media censorship. New tabloids such as the Ghanaian Chronicle and the Free Press devoted about equal space to reporting sex scandals as they did to lampooning the PNDC, now NDC. They included Jonah in this, assuming that his close friendship was with Rawlings and not with Nana Konadu. Since the announcement of general elections following the April referendum, the tabloids had temporarily shelved their salacious stories to focus on political rumor, for which the public had a similar appetite. The papers were hot with gossip over Rawlings' running mate. In the strange way that journalists sometimes wittingly or otherwise camouflage specks of critical truths with exaggeration or conjecture, the tabloids continue to speculate on the identity of the vice presidential candidate, despite the official announcement in the broadsheet that it would go to a Fanti called Aka. Now, this is very important, so I need to make this intervention. So just so that we get the story right. So it's a lady who wrote a book, nice Ghanaian lady, very intelligent Ghanaian lady. So the lady writes and says that all of these speculations were going on. The broadsheets, being the graphic, had already published that Aka was the big deal. But let's move on. I'll show you something. It says, Aka was a CPP man. Knowing the strength of the Nkrumah ticket, particularly in the rural areas, Kojo Chikata had brokered a pact with the CPP to allow its man to run as the NDC vice president to ensure an NDC victory. The pact imposed Aka on Rawlings, who failed to endorse him speedily and unequivocally. This is very important because the fact that Rawlings' body language to Aka was almost negative is in Sam Jonah's book, as we've just read. It's corroborated by Kwame Nkrumah. It's corroborated by Obed Asamoah. It says the same thing. And it's corroborated by Kojo Yanka as well. All of them say that Rawlings appeared at the beginning not to like Aka. And Sam Jonah's story is the same. So we move on. So Aka was the choice, but Rawlings was not sure. All right. This hesitation fueled the rumors that Rawlings was holding out for a candidate of his own choice who could appeal to the Akan electorate to complement Rawlings' strength with the other ethnic groups. When Jonah reported back his conversation with the editor of the Ghanaian Times to Fuichikata and Ansa. Okay, so I'll tell you, Fuichikata, who is mentioned here, is the younger brother of, is it older? Older brother of Chachu Chikata. Okay, Fuichikata, he taught me, so I know him. He's a lecturer at the Faculty of Law. He's a lawyer. He specializes in mining and stuff like that, land law, mining, and that's Fuichikata's specialization. At this time, Fuichikata had traveled with Sam Jonah to London doing his duties as lawyer for Ashanti, isn't it? Okay. And so Fuichikata was with a certain answer, and Sam Jonah had gotten a call from Christian Agri, the editor of the Ghanaian Times, that he should send his photograph to him. Sam Jonah wondered why the photograph, and he had this conversation with Fui, who then told him what it could be about. Okay. So Fuichikata and Ansan, they concluded that Rawlings wanted Sam Jonah for vice president. They concluded that the Ghanaian Times looking for Sam Jonah's photograph was because maybe Rawlings wanted Sam Jonah for vice president. 1992, when everybody says Rawlings' body language in accepting Aka was complicated. So this is the story. Let's move on. Sam Jonah now speaks through the biographer. A political career was the last thing on Jonah's mind. He knew without a second's hesitation that he would have to decline any opportunity to enter politics. He had no desire to be a politician and disingenuously explained to his colleagues that he was not interested in politics. But a man in his position, who was MD of the country's largest private firm, by terms of employees and foreign exchange generation, who knew the effect politics had on the economics and his firm's fortunes, not to mention his close relationship with the First Lady, and she says First Lady in the brackets, she would call him into her bedroom when she was having asthma issues. Okay. Such a man could not be disinterested in politics. So it shows that Sam Jonah was quite close to Mrs. Rawlings, and Mrs. Rawlings is still alive. Sam Jonah is still alive. That's very good. Sam Jonah was very close to Mrs. Rawlings, such that even when Mrs. Rawlings was unwell, sometimes Sam Jonah will be called. Okay. More accurately, Jonah was not interested in holding political office. His appetite for business grew ever stronger with the phenomenal progress that AGC had made, thanks to the recent capital injection. And there was more to do. The mine, he felt, was nowhere near achieving its full potential, and he wanted to take it to the next level. He, Sam Jonah, his hellmanship was at a similar stage to a rocket on its launch pad, and that has just begun its countdown. Okay, so that's an interesting prose that she puts there. All right, let's move on. Theo, we don't know who he is. Quote, Theo called again within 30 minutes. This time, Nana Konadu had telephoned insisting that Sam Jonah get back to her straight away. Fuchikata advised against an immediate response. Jonah needed time to compose his reply in such a way that will not cause offense. The three men spent good length of time preparing a soft-coated rejection pill. I like the way A. Taylor puts it. Okay. Jonah had to show elation and honor. He had to sound reasonably interested. Don't be too ready to say no. You know this lady, they counseled. Okay, I don't know what they meant by you know this lady, but the story goes on. The next morning, before the start of a major presentation to a large audience of banks to pitch for support for AMEP it was, Jonah found a quiet room to make the call. Good. Nana Konadu was not at home. She had just left for the office. He called there, the office. Quote, Nana Konadu's voice. Kwesi, where are you? She asked hastily. Why didn't you return my call? Quote, Jonah explained that he had gone for dinner and received her message far too late to ring back. You are going to be very happy indeed. My man wants you to be his running mate, and he has asked me to ask you. She had barely finished her sentence when Sam Jonah replied, I can't do it. I am not interested in politics. No sooner had he blurted this than he remembered the scripts composed the previous evening. He started again. Ajoa, my good sister. In addressing her by her day name, he attempted to redeem the situation. Nana Konadu interrupted him. Kwesi, I'm very disappointed. An invitation to the second highest position in the land, and you treat it as so casually. You don't even reflect on it. It's a question that Mrs. Rawlings is asking Sam Jonah. Okay. Jonah sensed that he was in trouble. As Fui had predicted, I only put it to you straight because you are my sister. But when you speak to the chief, I know as my sister, you will put it to him differently. Unquote. She expressed her disappointment as Mrs. Rawlings again, and the conversation ended. Okay, let's move on. A lot more here. As he always did on his travels, Jonah brought gifts for the First Lady and her children. On his return to Accra, he went to Nana Konadu's office to explain himself as originally rehearsed and to deliver the presents. The two were so close that no matter who was in her office, Jonah would be ushered in straight away. On this occasion, however, he was left sitting in the waiting room. In walked Adom-Otchere, formerly Rawlings' special assistant, but at the time, editor of the Graphic, a government-owned paper with the largest circulation in the country. Aya hugged Jonah warmly. My brother, he said, when the history of this country comes to be written, I hope somebody will record that you walked away from the number 2 spot. Perfect. Adom-Otchere is still alive. He's editor of the Graphic. He was editor of the Graphic. He explained how his newsroom had buzzed with excitement over the story. Jonah was the perfect vice presidential candidate. He would attract the dominant Akan tribes as well as the more conservative business and intelligentsia constituencies, Rawlings' most severe critics. Then, all of a sudden, they had to pull the story. Okay, this is Aya telling Jonah. They were informed that Jonah had declined the offer. Despite his disappointment, the editor respected Jonah's decision and admired his courage to say so. Jonah waited for more than an hour before he had the chance to clarify his stance with Nana Konadu. She downplayed her hurt, saying, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Okay, so That was 1992. So when Sam Jonah says today that in 1992 he was offered this on a silver platter, this is it. This is what he means. Whilst the story doesn't say he ever spoke directly to Flight Lieutenant Rawlings, doesn't say so, unlike Professor George Bennett, who spoke directly to Flight Lieutenant Rawlings, whilst the story doesn't say Jonah spoke to Rawlings, the Mrs. Rawlings was powerful enough. The story doesn't have Kojo Chikata in it. It doesn't have Obeda Samoa in it. It doesn't have Kwame Nahor. It doesn't have Chachu Chikata. It doesn't have any of the close henchmen of Rawlings. It doesn't have P.V. Obeng. It doesn't have Kwesi Boche. It doesn't have any of the close henchmen of Rawlings suggesting to Jonah that you are running mates. The suggestion first came, the suspicion first came from a request by Ghanaian Times for a photograph. It was followed by Daily Graphic for a photograph. And then eventually Mrs. Rawlings said, my husband wants you to be the running mate. No communication between Sam Jonah and Rawlings as accounted and reported in Sam Jonah's autobiography. When it comes to 1996, we have heard the story. And I don't know whether the video is ready. Is the video ready? Ask them. We have heard the story. Obeda Samoa says the story. Kwame Nahor says the same story. And we do have a video of the same story. It's exactly the same. I wanted to show the video before I talk about Sam Jonah's account in the book of the 1996 election. Yes, so the video is here. So that the story that Kwame Nahor tells in his book, which we have showed you, the story that Obeda Samoa tells in his book, which we have showed you, and the story that Kwame Nahor tells in his book, which we have showed you, is the same story that Kwame Nahor told me in the film that we did in 2016. Here is what he said.
Harry Sawyer was the Minister of Education, and he brought a memo to Cabinet asking us to reverse the decision of the University Council, and appoint Professor Mills because he was much better. And he extolled his virtues. In the middle of it, somebody told him that in this constitution, the government doesn't appoint the Vice Chancellor, it's the University Council, so it cannot be done. But he was very, very emotional about it. And the more he spoke about it, the more I said, Obeda Samoa was in the meeting, but he left before the meeting ended. So as soon as the meeting ended, I dashed to his office. He was Attorney General at the time. I said, Obe, this Professor Mills that Harry Sawyer was talking about, don't you think he's the person that we are looking for? Obe said, Jesus Christ, Kwamina, you are right. He's brilliant. I taught him. Yes. Why hasn't anybody thought about him? So he called Rawlings on phone, and they spoke in Ewe, which I didn't understand. And then Jerry said, come there. I know the man. I have met him. His IRS coming. Go to his house. Whatever it takes today, I want him as a candidate.
So that's Kwame Nahor's account. It's so interesting, so believable, so true, because that account is in Obeda Samoa's book. Same account is in Kwame Nahor's book. Same account. Kojo Anka talks about it. Same thing in D.F. Anand's book. Up until Professor Mills's choice, the issue about Professor Bennett excluding, saying that he doesn't want it, why Mills came in, it's captured in Professor Bennett's book. Sam Jonah KBE says, in 1992 he was offered, we've told you the story, and in 1996 he was offered. But in his biography, this is what they say about 1996. It says, when it came to 1996, vice presidential nomination, Rawlings did not ask Jonah again if he was interested in the position. Aka had resigned as vice president in the humiliation after being fiscally beaten. That's also not true. Aka never resigned. A.A. Taylor got it wrong. By the president during the cabinet meeting, blah, blah, blah. He went on to join the new opposition leader, the MPP's John Kufuor, as running mate. But the book says, when it came to 1996, vice presidential nominations, Rawlings did not. So, which one do we believe? The biography? Sam Jonah says that he was given the offer on a silver platter in 1992 and in 1996. He says that today, it's in this Paul story. 1992 is not corroborated by Obeda Samoa. No, it doesn't mean it's not true. But Obeda Samoa's account of 1992 does not mention Sam Jonah at all. Other accounts of 1992 don't mention Sam Jonah at all. Sam Jonah's own account of 1992 mentions him in detail, and he talks about how Mrs. Rawlings was the key architect in trying to get him to be the running mate. Doesn't say anything about Rawlings. Sam Jonah says he was offered in 1996 as well. But his biography says, I'll show you the page it was, so that it's very simple. So when I read it, I didn't believe it. Because I was quite astounded that, didn't the boss say that he was considered for the 1996? It's here. It's on page 148. Page 148. Maybe you should bring a camera so that people can see it. And then they can look at it. Can I walk to that camera? Okay. Page 148. Can you see it clearly? Let's see. Page 148. You can see there. It says, okay, they'll pick it in a minute. I guess we can see it now. Can we see it clearly? Okay, viewers, don't worry. It's here now. Where I have marked with the black pen. You will see it says, when it came to 1996 vice presidential nomination, Rawlings did not ask Sam Jonah again. That's it. That's in the book. That's quite interesting, because maybe the autobiographer was wrong. Maybe time has passed, people have forgotten. So we don't know what to do with the story now, because Sam Jonah says he was considered in 92 and 96. The account of 92 is in his book. In 96, it says he was not asked by Rawlings. The account in the book does not mention Rawlings asking him in 1992 at all. It doesn't say that. It says Mrs. Rawlings did, that Rawlings had asked her to. We believe that. It's to be believed, isn't it? Even though the other actors in the PNDC didn't know anything about it. I'm not sure how one was going to be running mate when Kojo Chikata, Obera Samoa, PV Obe, Kwesi Boche, the chapel committee, as is widely referred to in Obe's book, is referred to in Kwame Nahoy's book, referred to in D.F. Anand's book, referred to in Kojo Yanke's book. They are called the chapel committee. It was chaired by Rawlings. They made the determination of these things in 1992. They didn't know anything about Sam Jonah being on the ticket. Well, Sam Jonah tells us today that he was considered and offered on a silver platter. The account is clear. Mrs. Rawlings did. But in 1996, he says silver platter. The autobiography says no. When it came to 1996 vice presidential nominations, Rawlings did not ask Jonah again if he was interested. He did not ask him. So if the news media report says that I was given the thing in 1992 and 1996 on a silver platter, we have to contrast that with this one. And then maybe somebody can tell us. Mrs. Rawlings is still alive. Her daughter is in Parliament. I don't know whether they will want to corroborate the story about their mother being the main architect of getting Sam Jonah to be their father's running mate. I'm not so sure about that. But if Rawlings had asked Sam Jonah to be his running mate in 1992, and according to Sam Jonah's biography, did not ask him to be in 1996, it means that J.J. Rawlings held Sam Jonah in high esteem at that time. It also means that by the time J.J. Rawlings passed, unfortunately in 2020, his views on Sam Jonah and his relationship with him had grossly deteriorated. I'm sorry about that. Because this was J.J. Rawlings in 2019 at the June 4th event, referring to Good Evening Ghana, actually in the beginning of his narrative about an interview we had done in Alhaji Yusuf and all of that. But in doing so, he gave Sam Jonah a stray bullet. Sam Jonah was not part of the story. We went to interview Alhaji Yusuf ourselves. Sam Jonah was not part of it. And Alhaji Yusuf says things about Rawlings because Rawlings had broken down his hotel. And in responding to the comrades, the faithfuls of the revolution, J.J. Rawlings decided to speak about Sam Jonah, unprovoked. And this is what he said.
That I am accused of ordering the demolition because I had a bone to pick with his Sam Jonah. Oh, Sam Jonah, by the way, is not unknown to have a treacherous and greedier appetite than your little hotel. I'm not sure the misuse of my name will win you any sympathy. Your financial claims and that granted by the court was overblown. But that's how your kind mix business with politics.
That was J.J. Rawlings speaking about Sam Jonah in very uncomplimentary ways that we cannot repeat. That's not our view of Sam Jonah. That's J.J. Rawlings' view of Sam Jonah. So we are done. This is what we found. It aided our research. It will find expression in any document we put together, whether it's books or something coming up. It will find expression in it. But the story that we have to leave you with, which is unsettled, is was Sam Jonah offered the NDC flag bearership on a silver platter in 1992 and in 1996. In 1996, his own biography says he wasn't. But his testimony today says he was. But his biography by A.A. Taylor says that he wasn't. it came to 1996, he was not contacted. But he says here today, 2023, that in 1992 and 1996, it was offered to him on a silver platter. We have seen the 1992 account, not repeated by any of the key PNDC actors in any of these books, but discussed extensively in his book. Witnesses have been mentioned. Fuichi Kata, who is alive, so they know. Mrs. Rawlings is alive, so they know. So yes, that's fine. But 1996, the account of his biography says he wasn't contacted. But he says that he was offered both on a silver platter. Okay.